Welcome to Game Dev Game Love. This is a Game Dev London podcast mini-series where I talk to fellow game dev developers about games they really love and discuss it from a game developer's point of view. I'm your host, Quang from Asobi Tech, and today our game developer guest is...
I am David Dino. I am from Sumo Digital, and I work as a business development analyst over there. And I used to be, well, kind of still am a game designer every once in a while as well, too. So,
Wonderful. And can we ask quickly about your history in game development?
wow, okay. It's very interesting, to say the least, because I never had any real formal training on game development. I used to work in the healthcare industry as a risk analyst. And prior to that, I also worked in the military as a medic and also as an STD counselor. So those were fun times, to say the least. But I did computer science in uni, and obviously one of the reasons why I joined computer science was to make video games, but that didn't necessarily work out because I didn't like the atmosphere back then. So when I got back to the States and had a job in healthcare and whatnot, and got my master's in healthcare management and everything, started doing the whole analytics stuff. That's when Little Big Planet decided to hit into the foray around 2008. And, because I didn't have to worry about too many barriers of entry anymore, just the tool set they had and all the cool stuff that you could do, the immediacy of making a game like that in Little Big Planet. That's kind of sort of how it propelled me into the gaming industry. A lot of stuff that I made in the Little Big Planet community ended up being like big on gaming websites. Got really big onto forums and whatnot. Ended up getting some PR work with Sony in America, doing events, game jams, so on and so forth. And then after some point, after building this relationship and everything, and continuing to do the community content on Little Big Planet, and eventually Little Big Planet 2. Media Molecule and Sumo Digital asked me if I wanted to work on the franchise itself, and I was gonna say, of course. So I dropped all my all my healthcare stuff and flew from sunny Los Angeles to even sunnier Sheffield in the UK, and that's kind of been it since. And from there, I worked as a level designer, and then I got into telemetry analytics, which was I've always wanted to one of the main reasons why I wanted to kind of just go this route anyway, is to get into the industry and then potentially, if I can, use my previous talents and my skills in analytics to get into that. So I ended up doing telemetry analytics for the Little Planet franchise, then I ended up getting into marketing. Now I'm in business development. So
That's a wonderful journey. It's incredible. It's just all over. And I love where people come from game design from different perspectives and different views. It's amazing.
It's really cool. There's no right way to do it.
For sure, for sure.
Or at least there's so many ways to do it. So yeah.
So let's talk about the game you've chosen to highlight today and why you chose it.
Okay. Well, I'm a huge Gundam fan. I love this series. I'm kind of wearing Gundam shirt right now behind me, or behind the camera. I've all the unfinished Gundam models that I have as well too. And the game or at least the franchise, and the game that I want to kind of focus on is Gundam Extreme Versus. And it gets crazy because as the sequels continue on and on and on again, they add some of the most ridiculous things to it. So the most recent game that's coming out in July, which is worldwide, is Gundam Extreme Versus Maxi Boost On. And it's the fourth iteration of the Gundam Extreme Versus series, which the Gundam Extreme Versus series itself is the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth iteration of the Gundam Versus franchise in general. So I think for me, at least for a snapshot of it, it's a 2v2 arena fighter, to say the least, and it does an amazing job of not only encapsulating what makes the franchise really cool, but it's also a very, very, very polished game and fighting game, really. And it actually has its roots in Capcom as well, because granted it is a Bandai franchise because they own the license. Capcom, they actually did the co-development before I think it actually moved on to the Gundam Extreme Versus franchise, which even then people from Capcom ended up making their own company, which ended up leading the development for Bandai for the most latest iteration. So
as I understand it, was Ban Presto was the original publisher.
Yeah, that's correct.
In
that
the early
correct.
days. And Capcom have developed it since then. So Capcom obviously have a lineage in fighting games, and they know the fighting games very, very well. So, so mechanically, you would say it's a fighting game of some kind.
It's because it's a lot of games nowadays kind of like the arena brawler and whatnot. So you can kind of sort of put it in that sense. If the best way to describe it, right? It's virtual on, but with like 15 canisters of NOS. That's what it eventually got to. It was a way more sedate in its original iterations. But as you started adding more and more Gundam franchises into the game or into the series, how do you balance all that? Because obviously some Gundam franchises are way out there, whereas when you look at the original ones, not as crazy. Obviously they tried to there's that real robot mecha genre that it kind of adheres to. So
I guess for we probably need to explain for those who don't know what a Gundam is and what Gundam is about. Where's it from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm probably gonna get this wrong, but obviously in 1979, Gundam Mobile Suit Gundam was kind of like sort of the first robot franchise or robot anime to kind of sort of put it more of a realistic, what I mean, realistic spin to mecha anime, whereas previously it was more like Mazinger Z, Get a Robo, where they're like huge super robots and they do fantastical things, whereas these sort of had like basically like if tanks were to have feet in a sense, like that's kind of sort of how the real robot franchise separates itself from the more super robot franchise.
Sure. They have a grounding in reality.
Yeah,
well, in a not so distant future, this could be a reality.
Exactly. So, and obviously, interestingly enough, the first when Gundam Mobile Suit Gundam first came out, it wasn't that popular, but I think it was because of Bandai helping out with like the toys and whatnot. I think 2 years later or a year later, it just gained a huge surge in popularity, and a lot of people kind of relate Gundam. If you were to relate anything to Gundam, it would be the Star Wars of Japan, essentially. So
sure. So so they take this anime, and obviously it's done well, and because it's done well as a franchise, they make video games, toys, and so forth. I believe the models are known as Gunpla. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a shortening of Gundam Plastic, something like that.
That's correct. Plastic models, which they shortened to Plamo, and then Gundam. Yeah, so Gunpla.
Gunpla. And if I understand correctly, in the series itself, they then went very meta, and then in the anime you can actually use there's an anime about kids fighting Gunpla.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, one of the later franchise, one of the later series, I believe is called Gundam Build Fighters. So yeah, again, very meta. So they actually take their Gundams that they built, and a lot of people just in real life, they customize them to a certain point where it's not even the original one anymore. Obviously customized to accentuate their own personalities, and they put it into like a device, which then they can fight each other using that, which is really cool. I mean, I really hope that happens in some form or fashion. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be Gundams, but anything. That'd be so cool,
And do you know if they've taken this Gunpla and moved it into the Versus games? Is that translated across?
Interestingly enough, that would be awesome if that was the case. Of course, I don't think that technology is going to happen anytime soon. But some of the what is it? The units that have shown in those series have shown in the actual animes have shown up in this versus series in the genre, itself. So, which in itself is a weird meta version of all the Gundam stuff as well too. It's
Yeah, so I understand like current versus games have so many Gundam from so many different series.
Yeah.
Like almost 100 something like that.
Yeah, so the latest one, Maxi Boost On, that has over 183.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So you think about fighting games and you think about how many characters you can choose from.
Oh my god, yeah.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah, you got to start thinking about balancing, which goes into what tier and everything, and ultimately it's done really well. The series itself has been like the #1 earning video game franchise in the arcades in Japan for like a decade. And it hardly moves from the top spot as well too. That's insane. That's insane considering how much how much competition there is from like Sega, so on and so forth. You know, Square Enix does some stuff as well too, and it's wild. And then sometimes it feels like Bandai is obviously competing within themselves, but it's just that allure. And obviously it wouldn't do so well if it wasn't a great game to begin with.
Sure. So interestingly, like obviously it's done really well in Japan. I say it's #1 in the earner in Japan.
Yeah.
Whereas over here we barely know about Gundam,
Exactly.
especially in video games, which is crazy to think of.
Yeah.
Like obviously Gundam doesn't have a big as a following just because of exposure, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I mean, I don't work in marketing over there. I mean, it is getting better. I think so because they do have like they're doing a better job of like distributing. Like at least for the plastic model side, they distribute them pretty much as fast as possible. A lot of things that are Japan only sometimes they're making it a bit more accessible and whatnot. And then I think there's also a Gundam mobile game that's out in globally as well too, which is also helping that too. Whether or not it will be as popular or vice versa, that's I can't make that call. But I think a lot of, especially like when you think or when you see like a licensed video game, right? Most of the time, the average, fun factor tends to be relatively okay, not necessarily good. And anime games do have a reputation, especially when they're licensed, of not being the best they could be. And whether or not that's to budgets or everything like that. That's obviously one of the many factors as well. So not only getting a really good Gundam game, but a great game in general is an amazing mixture. And obviously as a Gundam fan, it's great. Absolutely great.
If we look at Bandai, obviously Bandai and Namco have merged into one company, and they released the Dragon Ball Z Fighter game.
Yeah,
which is obviously another huge anime franchise that has spanned the globe really, really well. Do you think that maybe has helped open doors for Gundam games to be coming over to the West?
I think that's helped a little because it's definitely helped in general because again, Dragon Ball, when you think Dragon Ball games, sometimes they could be relatively good, sometimes they tend to be crap. But showing the fact that we can make licensed games really awesome, I think that has helped kind of just open eyes a bit more. And because the franchise itself has been doing so well in general, and I think because of the work that Bandai has been doing on the West for, I guess, the franchise in general, I think now is a better time than any, really, to bring it over. And they did try previously with, I think it was Gundam Versus, and that came out in 2018. And I think aside from doing their best to like make it Western, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to do well, right? It really felt sedate in terms of, I guess, the visuals, and at the same time, how can I put this? It just seemed they tried to make it more convoluted than it should be. Like, I think the beauty of games that do well, especially like anime games, is that you like them because they're ridiculous, and there's a certain aura to them as well too. And the Extreme Versus franchise has character. Like it's insane. Like just lights and lights and lights, but at the same time, all these lights are telling you, they're giving you information, and it felt like, because it's going to the West, therefore it needs to be a bit more serious and everything like that. No, I want the ridiculousness, because you're putting all these these Gundams together, which in itself is ridiculous to begin with, and trying to balance all that stuff with the crazy lasers and everything. There's no need for that. And which is why I think people who are fans of the franchise that are in the West are even more excited, in terms of that versus Gundam Versus. Well, I mean, I played Gundam Versus a lot, but I kind of fell off on it because it was like, because of how sedate it was, and I think they wanted to make mechanically, they wanted to just add a couple more things to separate it from the Versus franchise, but there's already a lot of stuff going on in the game, and I think they made it too convoluted for a lot of people to get into.
So, have you been playing the Versus series since the first one?
Yeah.
You played them all through?
Yeah,
Every single
so
one?
as the moment I was able to get it, or at least import it, I think I got the first two that you could get. I know one of them came out on the Dreamcast, but at that point, I didn't have my Dreamcast. I was in the military, and I pre-ordered the GameCube version of, I think it was Gundam. Yeah, Gundam versus. It was Federation versus Zeon. I got that one, and then I got another GameCube version where it was Gundam versus Zeta Gundam, and then what else was there? There's another one, and then I think the next iteration was Gundam Seed versus. Then there was Gundam Seed Destiny versus, and then Gundam versus. It's insane, right? It's over and over and over again, until we finally get to 2011, which is when Gundam Extreme Versus first came out in what was it, for the PS4, at least hit, or PS3, and it hit the home consoles. Interestingly enough, I don't know if some people listening may remember this game, but it was built by the same people who in Capcom who built the Gundam Versus franchise, or at least the Gundam Versus games. It was called Gotcha Force, and that was, I think, 1v1 versus 2v2, but it uses a lot of the same mechanics as the Gundam Versus franchise. And I know when I talk to people online about, what's this game like, and I mentioned Gotcha Force, and they're like, oh my god, I remember that game. It was really cool, because that was like, again, it was like little toys in a giant, I guess, a kid's room that you were, fighting with each other. So it was, it was really cool in that regard.
So, okay, so we have now these two robots that you choose from a huge array, from this huge library of robots they have. Gundam, shall we say. And they're now battling one against one. And I understand the battles don't only happen on land, they happen in space as well. And how does that change mechanically? Yeah,
so I think they initially used to do that, but as things became a bit more competitive and a bit more balanced, they actually went away from spacefaring and seafaring, because I think mechanically you will have units that have huge disadvantages one way or another because of the way they were built and everything like that. And then once you have, again, a gigantic roster to deal with, obviously people and of course the amount of time that you spend balancing these things, you tend to find a very sharp curve of like how good a unit is and versus the rest. So people end up playing more of those. So I think, well, I didn't think, like, I know that it definitely separated, or the Versus franchise started to separate themselves from going into like all space, or water levels, and primarily just ground levels, where it gives you the illusion of being in space to help better even the playing field for all units that are in the game.
So, and also I understand that the different units have different costs.
Yeah,
so you have a certain cost to build a team together.
Yeah, exactly.
How does that work?
So you have, it's basically, each team has 6,000 points, and each unit has a specific unit cost. So the very strong units, right? It's like, let's say Unicorn Gundam, or somebody crazy like that. The more fantastical ones, Destiny Gundam, Strike Freedom, etc. They will have a cost of 3,000. These are like your pillar mobile suits, like the ones that you will find showcased on the animes, right? The strongest of the strong. And then you'll have three other tiers behind that as well too. 2,500, 2,500, 2,000, and now 1,500. And of course, when you start thinking of the tiers, you will actually start seeing, I guess, the type of unit they are, from like grunts to like older, like the older series as well. So the grunts would primarily fall into 1,500. The older series tends to fall into 2,000. Stuff that tends to be a bit stronger, or maybe have a bit more fantastical powers, are in the 2,500, and then of course your top tiered guys and gals are in the 3,000 cost. So you have to pick 2 units from any of those, and basically what you so there's a couple ways depending on how you guys play. Some units are really good at pushing forward, some units are better at support. And of course, depending on the skill of the player as well too, it's a very much a risk versus reward. In the game, whenever you die, depending on the cost that you have, so let's say I have 6,000 and I pick, let's say, Unicorn Gundam, and I die with Unicorn Gundam once, that my cost meter, or basically my team health, will drop down from 6,000 to 3,000. So, but if I use the 2,500 cost, it would come down from 3,000 to 6,000 to 3,500. So, yeah, my math is, I hope my math's good on that one. So basically, when you lose all your cost, it's game over, right? At least for the team anyway. And the interesting thing is there's this thing called cost over, where let's say I have a unit. Okay, so let's say, how can I put this? Oh gosh, this is a lot easier than it should be. So depending on how much life is left when I die, right? So let's say I have a 3,000, if my 3,000 units died first, so it goes down to from 6,000 to 3,000. If there's 3,000 left, I will have pretty much all my health back. But if for some reason there's 2,000 or 1,000 or 1,500, I actually get the divisible of that, the percentage of that back. So if I'm a 3,000 unit and there's only 1,500 left, I'm gonna get half my health back.
Nice.
Yeah, and that obviously will put my unit at a big disadvantage, especially if I'm a unit that needs to be going forward. So it's kind of like, depending on how you want to play. If you want to go all in, then it's 3,000 units. But understand, you can die really freaking quick. But if at the same time, you can pick 2 1,500 units and you won't die very fast, but it's going to be really hard to kill the other team because your firepower is nowhere near as strong as the other units in front of you. Of course, again, because of the balancing, sometimes it might be, you might have a better advantage depending on what type of unit you're facing against. Sometimes if you're playing like in random, you might end up with a team of 2 support units versus 2 melee units, and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to deal with this, etc. But usually when it comes to like the big competitions and everything that they have like in Japan, you will tend to see, how can I put this, compositions of teams where they do have somebody that is 3,000 and maybe somebody with 2,500, because they know how to balance and know when to move back and forth. It's similar to, it's kind of like like League of Legends, where you know when to move forward, when to move back, that type of stuff. It pretty much that, but very distilled and very big classic stuff.
How do you play? What sort of teams do you make?
I like to play support because I'm afraid of being in front. Unless that unit is not a 3,000 unit. I like characters with big lasers, because I can kind of just step back and support as much as possible. Of course, characters with big lasers are not fast, so if you tend to get lost, if you move away from the pack too much, it'll be really hard. Obviously, there's also, targeting lengths as well too, proper lock-on. So if you're in a green lock-on, your the homing of that particular attack will not be as good as if you were very close. Those are the different ways that they how to balance it, so on and so forth. I like fast units as well too, which allows me to run away. But one of my favorite units is it's this thing called the Ifrit Kai, and it's a melee focused suit, and aside from it looking really cool, I don't know, it speaks to me in terms of how I want to play. If I were to like get into somebody's face, very hit and run tactics, that type of stuff, very frustrating type of unit. And at the same time, if I were to die in the team because of my forward facing capabilities, when I die, it's only 1,500 lost to the team versus 3,000.
So I think there's a couple of things that we need to unpack that we may not have mentioned before. It's a team game, I understand, that you play with other players. So this is still done online or local?
You can do online. There's also local as well too. It's actually the first version to support LAN support for the PS4. In the series, of course, other games have done LAN support, but it's something that's been super requested for the longest time, for at least for the home consoles, and obviously on the Western side as well too, because this game does go to Evo and whatnot. When people want to set up locals, they don't have to connect to the internet anymore to do it. So even though they're right next to each other, but if you're playing arcade, there are a lot of single player options as well too. What tends to happen is you will pick your unit, and most of the time the CPU will pick the other unit for you, but there are some times where you can actually pick both, but you'll never be able to switch between the two. You primarily pick the one that you're going to work with. So yeah. And
the other thing you mentioned about fighting at a distance and fighting up close, so you have lasers and you use the melee attacks as well, so it's quite a complex fight game in that respect.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about team composition for the most part. Of course, you want, for example, maybe you like two mid-rangers, and of course they can control space a lot better. But of course, if the other team has somebody that can pressure really well, that will completely ruin the dynamic of that. So, but of course, you need somebody to support you. And one of the things, I think, one of the fun terminologies about the game is cutting players. So, it's all about stopping players, stopping the other enemy from attacking your teammate, and that's what they call cutting. Yeah.
So it has, I guess, similarities in games like I said, League of Legends, and I guess even Overwatch and other FPS games like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's more than just a fighting game.
Oh yeah. It's all about space control, when to jump in, when to step out. Because again, you're not only are you managing space, you're also managing what you have in terms of your team health.
And you also mentioned obviously they take it to Evo now, which is wonderful. And is it enough of a fighting game for it to be at Evo? Does it get a good reception at Evo?
I think, well, as of now, because it's more of like the side anime Evo type stuff. I think it's there. Obviously it being a very technical game in itself, that really helps. I would say, unfortunately, it does have a relatively high learning curve, kind of like games like League of Legends.
Fighting games in general.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I think it's a great alternative, especially if you do like fancy lasers and all that stuff as well too. Inputs and whatnot, I mean, they're not crazy, but again, managing 3D space in any game is tough. I can say, all right, Half-Life, Counter-Strike. Oh, well, not Counter-Strike. Well, even Counter-Strike is really hard. But like, let's say Half-Life Deathmatch, which is a game that I really loved. I mean, you go from just running around with your shotgun, and then you start, Tau cannon jumping and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of sort of like the level of expertise that's there in terms of the game, in terms of the mechanics as well too. So.
Yeah, I definitely found out, because I'm a Street Fighter player, and I found like you got to a certain stage where unless you had gone up to the series, you'd get left behind very easily, and you couldn't really enjoy it at the higher levels. if obviously Reset was Street Fighter 4 and then Street Fighter 5. I've not played either of those games, and even though I'm a veteran Street Fighter 2 player, I can't play 4 or 5 to a decent level. I can play casually and enjoy it, but if I play anyone who's any serious at the game, it's not enjoyable at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the beauty of the fact that, you know, it being a team game is that you can rely on your partner to help you out as much as possible. At the same time, you can also be like, you suck as well. It's never your fault in these games, you know. But I think that's the beauty of the Versus franchise is the fact that you are playing as a team. And granted, it does take a lot of teamwork to, especially in the higher tiers, which a lot of us aren't going to reach anyway. But being able to rely, and I think that the satisfaction of, you know, winning as a team is always really cool as well too. And it you know, and obviously looking really flashy with these Gundams and mobile suits is amazing, you know.
Okay, so let me ask you, what are the things you don't like about the series, and what are the things you really like about the series?
Okay, what I don't like about the series, I think currently, as you know, as crazy it is from a game developer standpoint, from a designer standpoint, it's so much, you know, that for me, wanting more people to get into into the game, it's super overwhelming. And I think it can do a better job of you know, getting getting people accustomed to the different tactics and everything like that. You know, it's great to be able to do the flashy stuff, but sometimes again, the flashy stuff might not necessarily be the best option. And because there are so many different situations that can happen in the game, because ultimately, yes, you can play through all the single player stuff and whatnot, but again, like with fighting games in general, what keeps the game going is the community and everything like that. And I think if it can find a better way to, like, you know, keep beginners together without players having to look for communities and whatnot, you know, and I think that's a fighting game community issue in general. I mean, they've done a great job, you know, even Tekken and Street Fighter with, you know, tiers and everything like that, and it has all that as well too. But yeah, it's a really effing overwhelming game, you know. It's wild, but it can do a better job of easing people into what, you know, the game or the mechanics, and helping people at least, you know, do some really cool things, you know, get like a nice meaty 250 damage combo or something like that. Just there's a better way of doing it. And and I think that's kind of just like a byproduct of how much is in the game and how much they're trying to cram into it. But it's great though, that's the thing.
And what are things that you love about the game?
Ooh, everything else. I think for this particular series, and I know I mentioned this when I was comparing the Gundam Extreme series to Gundam Versus, is how flashy and flamboyant it is. It knows what it is. It knows where it comes from. And it knows the fact that, you know, when we combine all these things, just go nuts with it. So even like the littlest things, from like having literally 500 options for your own player HUD so you can customize it and everything, it is insane. And I think they do an amazing job, and probably the best job out of all the Gundam games, epitomizing what it feels like to play like a hero unit as well too. I love a lot of the more realistic games as well, but there's a point where, you know, you just want to kind of jump into one and just do some wild combos and look really good at doing it as well too. And because, you know, like a fighting game, you can do it in spurts as well. So, and I think that the way they've done the team dynamic and balance, they've done an amazing job of balancing as much as possible. 183, and I'm pretty sure they're gonna bring in way more as well via DLC. It's just really cool. It's a cool looking game. It makes me feel like I'm playing Gundam as well, like my favorite franchises.
So yeah, I think it's definitely that level of wish fulfillment. It's like for
Yeah,
me, that's what
absolutely.
games are.
Yeah.
Games, I get to race cars that I never able to drive before. I get to fly spaceships. I get to fight, do super special moves and things like that,
Yeah.
and drive gun and pilot Gundam, and that's definitely, you want that to be fantastical. You want that level of over the topness.
Yeah.
You want it to be the best of the best. You want to watch. You obviously coming from an anime, you want that level of just the wow and playing it that you get from watching
Yeah.
it and then recreating those things.
Yeah, definitely. Like you
I
said,
think-
wish fulfillment. Definitely a Gundam power fantasy, for sure. Like I love making the models, but it doesn't give me the same, again, the same fulfillment as I would actually acting it out in a video game. And then obviously doing it with a teammate as well too. And I think having kind of like when people play Overwatch, when people play League of Legends, and they win with their team, that's really cool. You feel like you've done something together. Or if if your team happens to be pretty bad, you feel really good about yourself because you carried them to the end. I'm not saying I'm good. I'm not saying I'm decent.
So there's been numerous mech and robot pilot games out there.
Yeah.
I was a huge fan of Cybernator or Falcon on Super Nintendo.
Love that
and
game.
you mentioned earlier, obviously, Virtual On,
Yes.
which is great. I remember playing the arcade with the twin joysticks, and it felt like you were in a cabinet. You felt like you were a pilot. You felt like you were in a robot.
They're bringing those back, actually. the twin sticks.
Yeah, big fan of those.
Yeah.
Even you go to the Western side of things. You got Mech Warrior.
Yeah.
And you have things like the huge controllers and stuff. What's that one called?
Capcom made Steel Battalion back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think they've managed to capture that correctly? The feel of being in a Gundam, the feel of the weight and the size of Gundam.
I would say if you're looking for a more realistic interpretation of Gundam, no. If you're looking for a bit more of a fantastical, which a lot of the later series ended up becoming as well too. You're just kind of like, Metal Machine should not move like that, but it's really cool. Yes, definitely more of the later stuff. But I think they do a pretty good job of bringing some of the older units kind of like to match with them. Like for example, if people are Gundam fans out there, there is a series called the 8th Mobile Suit Team, which very felt like it's probably a really bad comparison, but like if we were to take all of the Gundam series as a whole, that would be like Platoon, the movie, is 8th Mobile Suit Team for Gundam, basically. A bit more realistic in that regard. And they do a pretty good job of keeping that unit as grounded as possible, but still being very technically sound in the game.
It definitely reminds me of the Capcom versus SNK series, where they also had tiers, and different characters had a level 1, 2, or 3, or even 4 tier characters, and you built your team according to that.
Yeah, you can have 3, you can have 2, or just 1 full on, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
Very similar in that regard. Yeah, now that I think about that.
And they obviously also had a very hard time balancing all these characters from different genres, different franchises, different games, and making them play coherently. And as a game designer, I can't even think of the headache that would be.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because you want people to pick everybody, but of course there's always going to be, just because of the way moves are created, movesets are created, and the technicalities of the hitboxes and what was it, frame traps and all this other crazy stuff. It's insane. Like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, for example. Let's throw everything and anything in that game, and literally completely different sprite styles as well too. But it's still really fun.
I think they were coming close to 100 characters, but still not as many as Gundam.
Yeah. I don't even know how it ballooned that much, in all honesty. I mean, amazingly, there aren't that many dupe characters as well, too. I would say a good 85 to 90% of them are like unique characters in that sense. So that's nuts.
I like even to have a lore that vast to draw from.
Exactly.
I
And
guess
they're
if
not
you-
even pulling everything.
Yeah, it's still more to come.
Yeah.
I wonder if they could maybe do like an Iron Man fighting game where you choose different Iron Man suits.
That'd be
'Cause
really
I know there's
cool.
quite a few of those.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure the Avengers game might do something like that. At least, get the different costumes, Mark 16 or Mark 42 and all that jazz. That'd be cool though. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
That would fit.
I wonder if you could do Iron Man versus Gundam or something like that. And then, I guess the scale's different though.
I mean, it's a video game. You can do whatever. Right? But I mean, like a Marvel versus game like that would be really awesome, considering again the different, the type of people or the type of characters that you can pull in from the Marvel franchise, have them work as a team, and everything, and just like, again, be a bit more fantastical in their powers and whatnot. Interestingly enough, that reminds me of a Bandai attempt at kind of sort of bringing the Versus franchise over, but using people with powers versus Gundam itself. It was called Rise of the Incarnates, and man, that did not do as well as it could have. So maybe not. But again, I think it all depends on, again, people's expectations, and obviously with Gundam being so big and people actually wanting to play Gundam, it's probably the best choice now to bring the final, or at least the latest iteration. No, it's not even the latest iteration of Gundam Extreme Versus. In arcades, now it's Gundam Extreme Versus 2, and it's like, wait, hold on for 1 second. It's very much the Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Super Street Fighter 2, Ultra Street Fighter 2, and then Street Fighter 3. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that they've obviously gone the Street Fighter route of being an iterative game release, rather than waiting 10 years to release this perfect version. They've released it gradually every year or every 2 years, and just improving over time.
Yeah.
And I think that's how games are nowadays, doesn't it? Because with DLC and updates and stuff and patches and things like that, the games get better as they go along.
Very much a games as a service thing, right? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. The game you get from day one isn't the same game it is at the end, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's wild, thinking that's how... I won't say all games will be like that, obviously, because, just due to budgets and everything and support. But being able to, to iteratively change your game, kind of like, how Destiny works and a lot of these games works now. I mean, I think that was definitely a pipe dream for designers and developers way back when, because I can only imagine what Miyamoto wanted to add to Super Mario Brothers after he released it. He's like, oh, come on, man.
Oh, just change this one thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe Fireball shouldn't have bounced. I don't know. Just some of the weirdest stuff that, obviously that's why, games have a lot of sequels as well too. But to be able to, address something and change it, or, add something that will do, help keep that player retention going on. Obviously mobile games are completely designed like that now as well too. Yeah. So it's very interesting. Very interesting from a design perspective, and how we can obviously improve our games, assuming we have the opportunity to do that.
Have you had a chance to play the Gundam Battle Pod machines in arcade?
Yes, I did. When I went to Japan.
How did you feel about those?
In, what was it, in 20... Gosh, it's been ages. 2006. It was the last time I've been to Japan. That's when I got to play it. That was really cool. Obviously you had the kind of sort of like the 180 degree thing. Yeah, it was really fun. Just standing in the line with a bunch of salarymen as well too. Just wanted to play for a good 10 minutes and then move on to the next. So I really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it has a really nice immersive feel to it, those battle pods.
Yeah, very
get in the cockpit.
Good heft, yeah.
Yeah, and they're the fans blowing air and stuff, and the big viewport, and it's it felt like you're getting a Gundam and you're piloting a Gundam.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I would love to give that a go again. There was this thing that I used
again,
to... Oh, sorry.
this is one of the things. It's such a shame that Gundam isn't as big as it is over there as it is over here. So other way around. It's not. It's a shame it's not as big over here as it is over there, and we don't get the same arcade experiences as they do.
I know.
We don't have those battle pods.
I know. I mean, obviously, Trocadero was probably the closest thing to that, and obviously, a lot of the arcades there, especially the Sega ones, are just have everything. Like, what was it? Just those card games that people play, and the machines are massive, and people come with like huge, like
Stacks
if you have like Pokemon card decks and stuff like that. Here we
Yeah.
go. Well, this is the plan for this particular match, and of course they're all network connected as well too. So they're playing people like if you're in Tokyo, you're playing people in like Osaka or Kyoto and stuff like that. It's wild, absolutely wild. I loved it though, absolutely loved it. I was able to. For some reason I had Lady Luck on my side. With all the claw grabbers as well too, so I made a huge haul. Like I got this gigantic Rilakuma pillow. I actually got a big Zaku from Gundam as well too, and like it was like maybe 1 or 2 tries, and I was like, good haul.
Big.
Yeah, absolutely good haul.
That's wonderful. So thanks again for coming along and talking to us about Gundam.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you're working on at the moment that you want to highlight?
Oh, I wish I could tell you. I wish I could tell you, but hopefully, at some point soon in the near future. Sumo Digital's doing a lot of crazy stuff, obviously, so that's really cool. As for myself, I just make a lot of silly things on the internet. So if you want to keep an eye out on my Twitter, it's that's cool as well. I think, what was it? Just over the weekend, I recreated the high ground scene from Star Wars Revenge of the Sith in Animal Crossing. Yeah, and it did way better than I thought it was going to. I was just like, this is just something I came up with. And yeah, so
what is your Twitter so people can find you?
Yeah, so my Twitter is Gevurah22, Gevurah 22. That is me. Yeah, and if there are any questions about game dev and everything like that, feel free to hit me up. We've also done several talks on game jams as well too. So if you're interested in doing game jams or participating, which is kind of sort of how I ended up getting into the industry with Little Big Planet, feel free to ask me at all. And I'm a huge advocate of game jams, and anything that gets more people interested into the industry. You'll be surprised at how much talent you have in some form or fashion. So give it a go.
Of course, definitely. More people in games, the better. Definitely for sure. Well, thank you again for coming along, and thank you everyone for listening to Game Loves for Game Dev London. My name's Quang, and you can follow me on Asobi Tech on Twitter. Also, while you're there, you can follow Game Dev London. And if you're watching us on YouTube, do us a favor, hit subscribe. That really helps us out. And of course, you stay awesome.